Hello friends, Jacob again, Mad Crazy Reviews, back with another director spotlight. Today we're talking about Paul Thomas Anderson. It's going to be very hard not to prattle on for 30, 40 minutes, I gotta be honest. If I had to name one filmmaker who is probably my absolute favorite, it's probably this guy. So it's going to be probably on the longer side as far as these go. I will try and be respectful and mindful of your time and try to keep it down. But again, it's probably going to turn into a gush fest at some point. So we'll go ahead and get started with the films just to get that out of the way. 1996, he made Hard Eight. 1997, Boogie Nights. 1999, Magnolia. 2002, Punch Drunk Love. 2007, There Will Be Blood. 2012, The Master. 2014, Inherent Vice. 2017, Phantom Thread. 2021, Licorice Pizza. And here, 2025, actually just next week as of this recording, One Battle After Another. Very, very excited about that one. So we got to go into a little personal history here. So why Paul Thomas Anderson? So it goes back to 1999. It was a big year for me movie-wise. That's when I first really started to kind of think about the process, think about movies as more than just like pop entertainment, and think about what was going into the movie behind the scenes, as well as, deeper meaning, that sort of thing. Try to think of it more as in terms of thematic material, overall storytelling, and again, not just, like I said, pop culture, pop media, entertainment, that sort of thing. So as part of that, that's when I first started watching Woody Allen. That's the first time I saw Annie Hall, still one of my favorite movies. That's when I first saw The Matrix, got obsessed with that one, as I talked about in the Wachowski episode. That's the first time I saw a Kevin Smith movie, Dogma, which, comparatively speaking, I've kind of moved on from Kevin Smith, like most people. Sorry. But at the time, I hadn't really seen a film comedy like that, so it still made a big impact. And also that same year, saw Magnolia. A friend of mine actually had seen it first when it came on video, and he's like, I don't know what this is. It's not like anything else I've seen. You got to check it out. It's really hard to describe. It's 3 hours long. It's got a bunch of people. There's a point where they start singing and frogs fall from the sky. Just didn't know what to make of it. And so I watched it, fell in love with it. It's still one of my absolute favorite movies. Looking at his entire career, I'm not sure I would call it his best movie. I think you can say some critical things about it. Kevin Smith famously disliked the movie and felt that people were being a bit overzealous in their praise of it. I still think it's fantastic. I think it's a great movie full of great performances. It's maybe a bit too big and a bit too ambitious, but there's some supplemental material on the Magnolia DVD, at least there was when I first bought it, where I think it was the first day of filming. There's like some behind the scenes footage where Paul Thomas Anderson himself tells the cast, tells the crew, something along the lines of, you know what, let's try to make a great movie here. Like, there's nothing wrong with that ambition. Let's try and do something really special. And I think that's a great ambition, and that's certainly a great note to start your production on. What are we doing here? We're trying to make something great. We're trying to do something unique. That's really cool, and that's a good guiding light to take to any project. Something else he said, this is probably on some commentary track, and I'm probably getting the exact wording wrong. I believe it was on Boogie Nights, but the basic idea, he makes very technically complex movies. A lot of camera movement, a lot of things need to be very perfect, very carefully timed. And so there's a lot of things that can go wrong on a take. And he said something along the lines of, the shortest time on set is between when you say action and cut, meaning that you spend so much time in preparation, you spend so much time rehearsing, blocking, staging, then the actual setup with the lights and, where's the camera going to go? What's the camera going to do? Coordinating all of that it's a big job. It's very, very complicated, especially when you have a director like this who has a very strong visual sense of what he wants to do. And that's something I've always tried to keep in mind with my own projects, or when I was in film school trying to do this sort of stuff, is you want to you want to capture what you need for the scene, but also it leaves some room for improvisation. Like, why not let the actors play around a little bit here? Let's see what happens. And I think he brings that to his films, and that's part of what makes them work so well, is that I get the sense he's not like dictatorial, and he's not just this tyrant on set. I get the sense that he's trying to work very closely with the cast and the crew to really create something special and unique. And I could be completely wrong. Maybe he's a total jerk and tells everyone to stand exactly here, say it exactly this way. I don't know. But again, I get the sense that there's more improvisation than we probably realize, and that he's trying to give the actors the freedom they need, but also mix that with the technical know-how and prowess that he and the crew have. So those are some kind of, I guess, film philosophy or philosophical points I wanted to touch on. What is it about Paul Thomas Anderson that I like so much? I think it's the fact that he seems to be able to do basically everything and to do it really well. Sorry, this hair is distracting me. He's done essentially musical, like there's musical moments in Boogie Nights, and he's got a fantastic ear for what song or what music cue should go with what beat in whatever the movie is. And I think that's a real strength. And if you look at the credits for some Quentin Tarantino movies, he actually thanks Paul Thomas Anderson occasionally. And my understanding is that that's because they've had discussions about music and film, and that he's made some recommendations that Tarantino has taken. Kind of some fun trivia. Again, I could be wrong, but that's what I've read online anyway. But again, he's had kind of big musical moments where literally the cast is dancing together and in unison. But I think you could think of Punch Drunk Love as a musical in itself. It's incredibly driven by the music and the soundtrack. And the closest thing I can think of as a comparison is Birdman, where you have Antonio Sanchez, who's providing a great deal of the music and really gets you in the headspace of those characters. It's a similar thing with Punch Drunk Love. Now, Birdman came out much later than Punch Drunk Love, but again, just that sense that the music and the sound are so vital to the experience, it becomes essentially a musical of a sort, even if the characters aren't like singing and dancing. I hope that makes sense. I guess it's more the way that the images coordinate with the sound that's what I'm trying to get across. So one, I think he's able to do basically whatever he wants to do. My understanding is that One Battle After Another, from the reviews that I've read, seems to be almost like a thriller with some kind of comic moments. Boogie Nights is hilarious, but also has these really big dramatic beats. Magnolia is a big melodrama, but it has some comedy, some humor, but also touches on some really big, deep human themes. Punch Drunk Love, like I said, is, I think, in my mind, more musical, but also very funny. There Will Be Blood, that was a big one. I think as time goes by, I think you can look at that as one of the definitive films about America, what makes America what it is, for good and bad. And that's that combination of like business and capitalism and greed and money making with religion, and specifically in that film, the exploitation of religion. Like, a lot of his success comes from pronouncing his faith, or at least, putting on show that he's a Christian, basically. And you've got like child exploitation, a lot of different things in there. It's not a great message about what America is, but I do think it's an honest message. The Master, That's that one's still kind of a head scratcher, gotta be honest. It's not my least favorite of his films. It was at the time. I was super pumped. It is one of the first movies that my girlfriend at the time, future wife, that she and I saw together of his. And we both came out of that experience kind of like, what in the world did we just watch? What is this movie? It's very enigmatic. It's kind of about a cult, but also kind of about an alcoholic, and it's kind of a character like drama, character study. Very interesting movie, very gorgeous, visually pleasing movie to look at. But I think it's one of those movies where the parts don't necessarily add up to as much. Let me rephrase that. It's one of those movies where the sum isn't as great as the parts. There are some fantastic individual moments in that movie. But again, I don't think it necessarily adds up to a great movie. Inherent Vice, hilarious in my mind. And the first Thomas Pynchon novel adaptation, or film adaptation, I should say. And there have been other ones here and there, but this is the first, to my knowledge, feature film based on one of his books that's actually follows it pretty closely. There are other films I've heard of that are inspired by Pynchon and Pynchon works, but it sounds like they're short films or like one-reelers, so to speak. This is, again, to my knowledge, the only one that's like feature length and actually follows pretty closely. And so it's a trip. Like, it's got Pynchon's weird humor, it's got his surreal style, his postmodern style. It's all there. And it's one that I don't think audiences quite knew what to do with. It worked for me because I came into that as a Pynchon fan, having just read Inherent Vice for like the second time before it came out, the movie that is, and I think it's a really good adaptation. So I'm very curious to see what he does with Vineland, turning that into one battle after another. My guess is it's not going to follow as closely because it's kind of a messier novel, but again, super excited. Phantom Thread, that one took me a bit. So a lot of his movies, he's absolutely in love with his characters. Even There Will Be Blood, where Daniel Plainview is this monster of a human being, complete misanthrope, just a kind of terrible person in a lot of ways, but written and filmed with such affection. Like, Paul Thomas Anderson really loves that character and feels for him and seems to want the best for him. He kind of treats him as the underdog, even though he's this powerful megalomaniac who brings a lot of his own downfall upon himself. It's really interesting, that contrast between director and character. But anyway, like I said, he has such love for his characters. Phantom Thread, it's more like insect study. Like, he seems to be much more removed. It's a very cold film. It's not very affectionate. It's not very warm and loving towards basically anybody. It's about this dressmaker who's very meticulous, fastidious, but also kind of a jerk and really rude to a lot of people. The kind of person who will bark an order at somebody, but with a smile and with a please and a thank you, and just is used to getting his way. And then that gets completely upended with a sort of romance. It's basically, in my mind, a study of just toxicity in relationships and how with just words you can undo each other, and how that bond is sometimes strong, sometimes working to the betterment of both people in the relationship, but also that power dynamic can shift so easily, where one person becomes a manipulator, the other person becomes the subject of abuse, essentially, verbal, emotional abuse. It's a really interesting study in power dynamics and relationships. Again, not the most comfortable one, but there's something about it, even though it's a pretty slow-moving film, a pretty emotionally uninvolving film. Like I said, it's a very cold film, but you just can't look away. Like, you're so interested in what's going to happen. It feels like at any moment, this thread that's bringing everything together that runs through the whole film is just going to snap and someone's going to lose their mind or someone's going to get murdered. Like, it feels like that tension runs through the whole film, like something's going to happen here and it's not going to bode well or end well for anybody in this movie. um, and then you go from that a few years later to Licorice Pizza, which possibly, other than like Boogie Nights, might be the most loving film of his entire filmography. Like, you want to talk about loving your characters. He is absolutely in love with these two. Cooper Hoffman, Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, who, Anderson worked with Hoffman a lot. And after Hoffman passed away, here he cast his son as the lead in this movie. And then I think it's Alana Haim as the sort of love interest. They're kind of on again, off again as like teenagers over the summer. It's just such a loving portrait of teenage relationships at that time. Sometimes they're really into each other, sometimes they can't stand each other, sometimes they're too immature for what they're feeling, sometimes they want to be older than they are. It's a really interesting, fun, entertaining movie. Another movie that is made up more of really nice moments that don't necessarily connect together, even though they work really well on their own. Like, there's that sequence where she's trying to back the truck down a series of hills and twists and turns in the highway, out of gas. She can't use the brakes. She can't use the gas, obviously. It's riveting and exciting. And then you have other things where they're just kind of goofing around, chasing each other and laughing. It's such an interesting mix of emotions. And like I said, he is absolutely in love with these characters. I hope that gives kind of a sense. Those are all the movies. Stylistically, very strong visual sense. There's always been a lot of movement, a lot of music. There's a good rhythm and flow to his movies. So that's why even when they're long, like the shortest movie is probably, I believe, is Punch Drunk Love. It's like an hour and a half. Other than that, they're almost all over 2 hours. And like I said, some of them, Magnolia is just over 3 hours. Boogie Nights is like 2.5. One Battle After Another, apparently close to 3 hours again. And even Hard 8, it's like an hour 40, something like that, hour 45. That was originally supposed to be apparently much longer and much more in keeping with the rest of the stuff he's known for. But I guess that one essentially got like taken away from him, recut, re-edited, shortened quite a bit. And so if you hear him talk about that movie, he kind of disowns it. He basically says that this is not the movie I set out to make. This is not how I wanted to make it. This is not what it's supposed to be. They even changed the title and stuff. Like, it's one it stands out, and I think it's because of that level of interference. It sounds like basically it got taken away and completely recut and redone and repackaged as something that he wasn't trying to make at the time. I'm probably explaining it poorly, but the main point is, I think Hard 8 feels so much different from the rest of his filmography because of that level of interference. And actually, I'm going to start wrapping up soon, I promise. That apparently led him to really advocate for himself, really lobby for himself with Boogie Nights, because it's kind of a hot script. It looked like one that would be rife for Oscar nominations because there's so many big dramatic moments and so many big like actor moments, like Look at Me. And they're right, it did get a bunch of nominations, where he essentially told the studio, look, it's going to be 3 hours long, it's going to be NC-17, and it's going to be, when I say I want the camera to follow this person around for 5 minutes, it's going to be 5 minutes. Like, really, really making demands. And they negotiated a little bit. Basically, they said, it can't be NC-17. You can have everything else you want, but we need to be able to put this in like an AMC, like a mainstream movie theater, and that can't happen with an NC-17 movie. So the way Paul tells it, at least, he says, you know what, I'm going to take that challenge. I'm going to take this movie about the porn industry and somehow make it R-rated instead of NC-17. And then it wound up being less than 3 hours anyway, and I mean, it kind of launched his career. Like most people didn't really think much about Hard Eight. It kind of came and went. But again, Boogie Nights really put him on the map, and then he just kept going and up in the ante with both what he was doing creatively, but also the amount of nominations he's gotten. I'm pretty sure almost all of them have gotten some sort of Oscar nomination. I think if I had to pick one person out of this like current generation of filmmakers who are going to go down as one of the best, or potentially even like a legendary American filmmaker, it's going to be Paul Thomas Anderson. I really just think he's immensely talented. He's a great writer, fantastic director, good ear for music, good ear for dialogue, good ear for when to let the actors go, but when to rein them in. I just can't say enough good things about him. I loved basically every movie of his. If I had to rank them, I would probably put Hard Eight at the bottom, and that's, again, nothing against the movie. I think it's a pretty good movie. It's just that it's, again, out of character with the rest of the filmography. So here, let me see if we can actually do a ranking. That'd be really hard. A lot of these I would rank 5 out of 5. So let's actually just go through numerically and rate them. I would put Hard Eight at like a 3.5 out of 5. Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, There Will Be Blood, all 5 out of 5. The Master, maybe close to 4, 3.5, 4. Like I said, a lot of great moments, even though I don't know that it necessarily adds up to a whole lot. Inherent Vice, 3.5, maybe a 4. It's very good for what it is. It just isn't tackling those big human things like all these other movies are. Phantom Thread, I'd initially put like a 4, and after watching it again recently, more like a 4.5-ish, somewhere in there. Licorice Pizza, it's just such a happy, warm film. I would put that one also 4.5 or so out of 5. So high hopes coming into one battle after another. I didn't love Vineland, but very curious to see what he's going to do with it to transform it into this movie. So again, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Jacob, Mad Crazy Reviews. We've been talking about Paul Thomas Anderson, probably my favorite director. And again, I really would not be surprised if looking back years later after he's retired or dead or whatever, not making movies anymore, that we're like, you know what, that guy had it. He was one of the best. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. You can check out more of these director spotlights on YouTube and Spotify. You can also check out written reviews on Instagram, Substack. You can check out original content, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I'm on a lot of the big social media stuff, so please check it out. Like it, subscribe, share, whatever, do all that stuff. Would really appreciate it. And I'll see you again next time. Thanks for stopping by.